I don't like the phrase come out because it smacks to me of confession,
Yeah.
of me revealing myself. Like I owe you something about me. That's something that's really personal. I don't really like that phrase. I like the idea of sharing your sexuality. I don't owe you anything. I don't owe you. I like the idea of inviting people in,
Yeah.
even though that sounds a bit creepy and sexy.
I know what you mean though. Like it's about sharing
It's about
parts
sharing.
of you, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's showing vulnerability, but also it's showing that, you know, it's an honor for somebody to tell you something personal about them.
Right.
So that is sharing. And I guess that as we were talking about reclaiming words, coming out, so that hasn't actually felt comfortable with you. You wouldn't use that. If someone was like, when did you come out? You'd be like, I don't use the word come out.
I did. And it was me interviewing other people and them challenging me back, being like, one, why do I owe you this story? I'm not giving you talk like tragedy porn.
My next question was going to be about the word queer itself. So I think this is an interesting one.
Let's get into queer.
Yeah. So the word queer, right, hasn't always been a word that we would throw around as much as we do these days. To a lot of people, and a lot of people I know actually, they still don't, it doesn't sit comfortably with them. I'm just going to use an example. So I've got like a gay friend who's in his 40s and he still finds that word like, that is not, I'm not queer. It does not reflect me. You know, I'm a gay guy. It's no offense to like the rest of the community. It's just that that word still feels a bit uneasy with me. And it kind of got me thinking about like the reclaiming of words in general. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because like you can use them and think like, I'm just going to call my friend a fag or whatever. But to someone that could be like a really, still not a word that they're comfortable with.
Sure. I think we need to separate out the words. I think those two words that you used are slightly different. I feel that in queer company, we can use language that we maybe wouldn't use in mixed company. I also think that we are allowed to use words about ourselves and each other that other groups aren't. I think also lesbians can use words that they want to about each other that I might not have the right to use. Same with my trans and non-binary friends. I love the fact that queer makes me feel uneasy, and it still does. And I like this conversation. I like unpacking words. I like working out why they're a bit dangerous. For me, LGBTQ plus people have always been quite punk and political. And I like the idea of things being dangerous. And I'm more than happy to have conversations with people that are like, I don't like you using that word, or I don't want to use that word, or I feel uncomfortable that that has come into common parlance. When I was at university, I remember hearing queer studies, and I found that so offensive because to me, queer was a term of abuse that had been leveled at me.
Right.
It hadn't been a word that I'd reclaimed. And it was one that felt, it had meaning attached to it of being like less than, perverted, different from the norm. And those are now all the kind of things that I quite like about it in a weird way.
Yeah.
I mean, I talked on my podcast, Queerphoria, I spoke to Stephen K. Amos about this, the comedian, and he was saying how he cannot handle that word. He does not like it.
Yeah, really.
He doesn't want to use it. And we spoke about it, and I really heard him and really listened to him. And we kind of moved through. And by the end, he was like, no, I feel different about that word. And I felt different about that word because I'd listened to him. I also think it's about how you use it as well. Like if someone leans out of a car window and shouts that at me, that's not okay. But in this context, when I'm talking about my community or as a collective umbrella term, that's actually quite a big umbrella term.
Yeah.
I like it.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because these words kind of like, I mean, it's always changing, isn't it? And shifting, and suppose like, I mean, this has been the past 5 years or something. I mean, you'll know so much more about the history of the word queer than me.
I mean, yeah, weirdly, not to go on about my own podcast, but on Queerphoria, I was speaking to Ian McKellen about this, and he was like, they used to call each other camp. That was the word they'd use. Queer, again, was kind of a word that was maybe more commonly used and then died out and became a term of offense and then has been reclaimed again. But like, I've seen it happen. I remember when it wasn't a word that I would ever use about myself. I think also it's about the opening up of the LGBTQ plus community as well, that it was, I felt like we were so separate growing up. And they weren't in nightlife. Like when I was going out, we were all hanging out together. But I feel that like the way society spoke about LGBTQ plus people. It was often gay people, lesbian people, trans people, non-binary people. Non-binary wasn't even a word that was commonly used. And then it was more like LGBTQ and then plus. And I think queer is a really lovely word that is less maybe about who you have sex with, and it's about a way of approaching the world. It's a way of saying that you reject the kind of patriarchal norms of society and live differently. But then that's not to erase the sexual aspect of it, because I think that's incredibly important as well.
Do you think that a straight person can be queer?
Yeah.
Trans people can be straight, but I mean, like, a sort of cis straight person, could they use that word as like, oh, if they experiment with clothing or just general, like a sort of straight drag queen, I guess? Like,
that's different. Let's take the example of someone that maybe isn't a drag performer.
okay.
I think that makes it a bit easier to say, yeah, they are queer.
Okay, yeah, let's not talk about drag.
Yeah, do you know David Sedaris, the writer?
No, I've heard the name.
He's brilliant. So he hates the word queer. And I actually asked him to contribute an essay to the Queer Bible. And I think this is probably why he didn't agree. He hates that word. And he said that he heard a woman describing herself. If this is wrong, I really hope I'm not misquoting him, but that someone said that they were really tall and that meant that they were queer. I'm pretty sure that's what he said.
Okay.
And so he's like an older guy, and he's just a bit like, oh, you crazy kids, you can't just define anything as queer. And I do think we need to be careful about how open-ended it is, because people have fought so hard for rights and identity that is very much tied up with gender expression and sexuality. And then I like that it's a welcoming umbrella term, but I also, if I'm really honest, probably find it a little bit annoying if someone just says that they're queer and they just, I don't know, don't have a non-conforming gender expression or sexuality, and maybe they've just dyed their hair pink.
Yeah, I was literally going to say dyed their
That's
hair.
maybe a bit annoying.
Yeah.
Is that bad?
No, I think I agree.
Am I saying, welcome all, everyone come in, and then we're like, not you.
Yeah, not you.
That's really bad.
No, it's not. I get it. I totally get it. I think that there needs to be some respect given to these terms and kind of the journey that they've had to go from an original word to an insult to then being reclaimed to then then that needs to be respected.
And I kind of feel people have earned it as well. Like, I didn't spend years at school getting bullied within an inch of my life.
Oh, were you actually targeted then, were you saying?
Yeah, no, I got bullied so badly.
Oh, really?
For me, I think it was because I was effeminate. I was really effeminate and sensitive. And